Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Indie Film Wrap. We have a special part 2 with Jimmy Matlosz. Get ready for some wisdom. I want to talk about funding too. And I know, that can be a challenge with filmmaking, is getting that funding. For you, do you have any tips for...
Well, to segue into that, I mean, over the course of my career, I've migrated from, like I said, being a PA, camera assistant, technician, camera operator, cinematographer, and then I started directing commercials around 2004. About the same time, I really started to shoot full time, and then I was gambling like a lot of what filmmaking is, and a lot of what our careers are. It's like going to Vegas. You hope that you're going to run into somebody who might actually be making a film, like a cinematographer. They're all walking around looking for a director that's going to hire them for their next movie. And you can keep looking and looking. And when you look at it, there's people that grew up with, cinematographer and director grew up together, known each other since they were 5 years old. Other ones get lucky. Wally Pfister, legendary, didn't want to work with Christopher Nolan, but somebody said, you should work with him. Roger Deakins supposedly was ready to leave the business, and then he ran into the Coen brothers. And that's a lot we base our careers on, is just random, chaotic luck. It's a really bad idea. And I built what I thought was a solid foundation, and what I thought, okay, I'm going to meet the director someday. And what I found was, the film career is a lot like dating. Like you said, like sometimes you get along with people, sometimes you get along fine, but you're just not meant to be. So what this all leads up to is you have to build this solid foundation so you can work no matter who you're working with. So you can't bank on one person to feed you for your entire life. And if that person decides they're going to work with somebody new, you're SOL. So what happened with me was, that was the process. It's like, I was shooting a lot and working with all these different directors, and none of them were making movies or taking that next step to bring me along. It's, and I worked with some people who I thought were amazing directors. My friend Curtis Linton, who directed the first student IMAX film. I mean, I thought he was brilliant. I was like, this is the guy I'm going to be working with. We're going to make movies. We're still great friends to this day, but he's out of the business. Just because some people can't make it click for whatever reason.
I have seen so many amazingly talented friends who are just beautiful to watch on film, so funny, so talented, but they left the business because they couldn't handle it. And it's hard to see that when, like you said, you have these talented people and it's like, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. But so I empathize with that.
but the key to it is, and granted, I came from, like I said, a very blue collar background, and if I went back home, my parents were not going to give me money. They'd be like, get a job. If you can't make it in the film industry, get a job somewhere else. And it was fun while it lasted, and good luck, right? But I built what I thought was a solid foundation. And there are ups and downs. There's massive up and downs, but I still managed to raise 2 kids, and I've owned houses, and I've sold houses, and I've had new cars, and I've had old cars. I've traveled the world. I've, had times where I couldn't travel at all. You learn to live a certain lifestyle, but the key is to have a marketable skill. And a marketable skill, I feel, in the film industry. I have a friend of mine, Alexis Ostrander. Her career has taken off through the roof. But when I met her, she was a college graduate, had directed a documentary, and the documentary got picked up by Sony. And then she was dealing with student debt. And I hadn't talked to her for about 6 months or so, and got in touch with her. And she was working at the Apple store out in Woodland Hills. And Woodland Hills is 15 miles outside of Hollywood. Not really the place you really want to be. And I was like, why are you doing that? A friend of mine knew a fairly well-known Hollywood insider who needed an assistant. And I said, Alexis is perfect for this job. She got the gig, and she came in and she negotiated hard too. She's like, I need $1,000 a week.
Wow, good for her.
She got the money, and it pulled her from what I understand, it really helped her out pay her debt. And then
Mm.
she took a couple of classes at AFI in directing, and
Oh,
now she's
nice.
done like Smallville, and
Oh, wow.
I know her career's really taken off. So my thing is get a job in the industry.
Yeah.
If you're an actor, you can work as a grip, electric, camera,
Mhm.
scripty, whatever it takes. I've got another friend of mine, Carrie Lazar, who is a very well-known second assistant, and she's an actor.
Nice.
And she was in The Magnificent Seven. I know that. She was in, I think she was in The Big Short, a couple other movies. But I think that's one of the mistakes people make is that they want to be this one thing, especially people that want to
Mm.
be directors. They want to
Yeah.
be just a director. I can only
Yeah.
be a director. Well, even Jim Cameron started out doing special effects for Corman films.
And these other things, these other areas of filmmaking are only going to help your directing. So
Yes, they
why
are.
not?
Yeah. So you asked about financing. So what this all means is, so for me, it was, this career is going and I'm enjoying it. And then strangely enough, the bottom sort of dropped out of the commercial market for me. And it was weird. It was about 2015, mid 2015. I just had this gut feeling I was doing this job. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to work again too much after this. And I have no idea why I had that feeling.
Oh,
And next thing you
interesting.
know, I didn't work for like 2 or 3 months for no reason. Same clients, same everything, just no work. And I really had to have that come to Jesus moment. Like, what am I going to do? And I also thought, why did I get into this industry?
Mm.
And I got into this industry to make movies. Commercials are fun, good way to make a living, great way to experience, great way to learn. But I really wanted to make movies. So I started to hunker down and I really finally took screenwriting seriously. I
Mm.
had tried writing a screenplay in the late 90s, early 2000s. I literally wrote it entire thing longhand. And then so in 2009 I went back, transcribed the whole thing,
Wow.
and to a final draft. And I had realized when I looked back that I really had been studying screenwriting the whole time. I just didn't call it that.
Uh,
So 2009 I took screenwriting more seriously and just started to really think about it more, like really pay attention to how films are made, and the 3 act structure and everything else, while dusting off an old script I had. And it wasn't until 2016 that Panasonic came to me and they wanted to do a demo for their camera. And I said, let's make a short film. And they're like, do you have an idea? I'm like, I'll figure something out.
you're like, yes. And then ideas,
Exactly.
ideas, ideas.
Yeah. So I knew I had a friend of mine had a warehouse I knew I had access to, whether I had money or not. And I literally Googled, movies starting in a warehouse.
I love it.
Thinking,
That's a great like exercise to do. Like if you have a location that you can use, maybe start there. That's a yeah.
yeah. So what I wound up doing was I wrote the script longhand because I actually really hadn't tapped into final draft yet. It intimidated me. So I wrote it longhand and my girlfriend put it into final draft because she knew how to do it. And I wrote it on Wednesday. I pitched it to Panasonic on Thursday. We shot on Friday. I think our budget was $2,000 total. Yeah, I feel like it was 2,000. So everybody got paid, actors and everything. I didn't. Girlfriend didn't.
Yeah.
But we knew we had access to the space. I knew the space intimately because my friend lived there, and it was his shop. So I knew every nook and cranny of it.
Mm,
So I could write
which
the script,
helps.
and
Yeah.
I could figure every single shot, every single angle out in my head. And it just got
Mm.
lucky that it was a sunny day. So we had sun coming in, which helped. We had a noon call time, and I wanted to shoot because it was also a camera demo. I also had to prove the camera
Oh
worked, and
yeah,
I had to
yeah.
bring that element into it. So I had overexposure, underexposure, daylight,
Oh,
nighttime, all
I
that stuff
see.
built
You have
into the
to.
script.
Hmm.
And we had a noon call time, and we were taillights at 11:30 p.m. Done, and we shot the whole thing. Never did a pickup,
Wow.
and
So just
it
under a
came out.
12-hour day. That's
I was exhausted after lunch. I totally hit the wall. I was a zombie, and I was like, "Get me caffeine now." And it's interesting because one thing I noticed that I missed certain things afterwards. Like after lunch, my directing wasn't as sharp.
Oh,
I missed
interesting.
certain things, and that's the great thing about directing again and again is
Mm.
that you realize the things you have to pay attention to that you can't just let it slide.
Yeah.
and you have to be tuned into your actors and all that stuff. So I made the film. It's called The Online Date. Released it. Did a few film festivals. Won one or two awards, not much, but I was very proud of what I did. And so I finished editing that in August. So we shot it in March or April. And then I sat down and I started writing the screenplay based upon that short. And I
Oh, okay.
gave myself a Christmas Eve deadline. And I turned in my very first draft on Christmas Eve. And I had so much fun writing it that I
Oh.
realized I need to write again. So since then, I'm on my fifth screenplay. So this is what leads us into the financing part. So like your career in filmmaking feels like a lottery, the screenwriting thing is also pitched like a lottery.
Mm,
Like you write a script and then you just give it to somebody and they buy it and they make it. Those days are gone. That ship has sailed 10 years ago.
wow.
It just doesn't happen like that anymore. So what I realized was I'm going to write these scripts. I'm going to put them into some festivals, some critiques, but not much. I'm very dubious of them,
Mm,
just to prep it. And a friend of mine who runs the ISA, the International Screenwriters Association, I talked to him very long about this. And I was like, what's the deal with the festivals? What's the deal with the competition? He said, I feel like they're a waste of time. He goes, the best thing you get about it is you prep your script.
mm,
You check it for typos, you dial it in. It puts you very focused back on the table, writing your script and tweaking it and making
mm,
it the best you can, because you don't want to hand somebody crap, or you don't want to spend
yeah.
$45 to get for to give somebody a crap script. So that was
And it
the
gives you a deadline too.
yes, all those things. So if you keep that in mind, so that gets into that. And one thing I realized, or I came to realize very, very quickly, was I'm going to have to make my own films. I'm going to have to find my own financing. And this is where filmmaking is a business.
Mhm.
Don't let anybody tell you anything otherwise. There's a podcast called How I Built This. I highly advise every filmmaker out there to listen to it. And it's about people who build businesses, from Sierra Nevada
Ah,
beer to,
mhm.
skincare to women's clothing to men's shoes, right?
Yeah. And
And we are no different. We're
yeah.
making we're making widgets to sell to people. I mean, and it's interesting. You can say, well, that's not fair. It's an art form. You can call it an art form all you want. It's a widget.
Yeah.
And if nobody needs your widget won't sell. So your widget better fit into the place people want it to, meaning their soul, their consciousness, their funny bone, their terror factor, whatever it is, whatever you're making has to fit into that. And you have to market it as a business. And once you accept that and move on with that, then you can start studying how business works. So you have your product, you have your widget, which is your screenplay. Now you have to find someone to potentially give you money
A
to
buyer. Yeah.
bring it into fruition.
Yeah.
Whether it's $5,000, $50,000, 500,000, 5 billion. You have to then you have to know how to be a filmmaker. So what this means is you have to know how films are made. You have to know how business works, and you have to know how to market your widget, which is your screenplay, and you're also marketing yourself too. As far as finding money, what I'm discovering from listening to this podcast, How I Built This, some people get the mystery money, right? They're like,
Mm.
oh yeah, I just started a business and I had $1 million. That's nice. Other people have a wealthy uncle.
Yeah, a
But there are,
relative.
yeah, well, and that some people have that, and some people have that wealthy uncle they feel comfortable borrowing 50,000 from. 50,000 can get you an actor of some prestige, at least with a couple IMDb credits, because you could pay them 15,000 and then make your film for 35.
Mhm.
And all you need them for is a couple days, because that improves the opportunity. You have to decide what kind of movie you want to make and what kind of actor you want it and how you want it to be done, right? That's your decision. But it is a business. And if you look at it as that and you're okay with that, like if you're not like, oh, I'm an artiste. Well, good. That's wonderful.
Do you want to be a starving artiste or do you want to be an artiste that eats?
Yeah, but be a business person and just
Yeah.
accept that you're running a business, and talk to your local. Like, I'm up in North Idaho, so I'm in a town of 7,000. We have a lot of small businesses up here. And I decided to start my film production company up here instead of Los Angeles. But when you think about it, if you're in LA, everybody in LA wants to make a film. Everybody in LA is looking for money and this, that, and the other thing to make a film. I'm in North Idaho. I'm the only one really up here trying to make a film.
Mm,
In every community, there is the potential for investors.
yeah.
Potential. I'm not saying that, the neighbor next door is going to give me the money, but the potential is there. I'm also pitching it as I'm going to bring money and jobs into the community.
Yeah.
And then I get, I kid you not, people be like, well, how are you going to shoot in Idaho? You don't have any support. Well, Netflix just announced they were shooting a movie in Finland. And I don't hear people going, Finland, what are you, crazy? How are you going? Come on. I'm 75 miles from Spokane. Everybody's got lights, camera, and all the gear everywhere else. I told somebody, I said, I have lights and camera in LA. I can just drive it up. And they're like, well, that would be expensive. Not really.
Yeah.
It's a couple $1,000 that's worth it. And if
Yeah.
that couple thousand is going to break my budget, I'm in trouble.
And
So,
like you said, not having as much of a saturated market, like not as much competition as someone would in LA, and the rent, other factors that you save money on. And
oh my gosh, yeah, like, I've heard it said also, oh, there's no tax break there. But okay, so we go to Atlanta, we get a tax break, and our lead actor wants to stay in a 5-star hotel. That's $350 a night.
Mm,
And they're there for 2 weeks.
yeah.
I can rent a house on lakefront for $1,200 a month. I can get a house up on the ski resort for that much money. So there are those factors. And granted, I'm gambling on this. I'm rolling the dice on it. But I feel like it's a shorter gamble, an easier gamble than trying to find funding and all that in LA. Now, granted, I have a lot of roots in LA and I have a lot of connections.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I'm ignoring that factor. The short film, I sent you the link to the short film I did during
Alone.
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to see that, and yeah, it was really, really cool.
Dark.
I love it. Yeah, I like the there's interesting perspective shifts happening in there too. I don't want to spoil anything, but
No, it's okay. So that was part of the push when COVID hit was, okay, I've got a lot of free time, like everybody else. I better be productive with my free time.
Yeah.
Alex Ferrari, who runs Indie Film Hustle,
Yeah, okay.
he's been a huge inspiration, and he actually did this podcast about, what are you doing when you get home from work, and what are you doing on your lunch break and everything else. And it's funny, I was listening to that podcast when I drove my car off the road in the snow, and I had to walk 6 miles round trip to get a shovel and rubber treads to get my truck out.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, what an appropriate podcast listen, because even he goes, even when you're driving, listen to podcasts about filmmaking and everything else. So afterwards I contacted Alex and I said, funny enough, when I was listening to your podcast, I was listening to it because I had to walk 6 miles round trip in a snowstorm. And he loved it. But yeah, it definitely resonated with me. It's one of those things, you always have to be doing something that leads to your end result.
Yeah.
Now that could be painting pictures too, because that could be what's inspired you creatively, right? And if you're a filmmaker painting pictures, nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'm very focused. My days are short now. I've only got another 45 years on the planet. But, so I need to be a little more productive. So when COVID hit, the first thing I said is there's no way I'm coming out of this without a short film. And I have no actors. I have limited gear. I have no lights, no C-stands, no grip equipment except for grip clips, a couple of LED batteries or flashlights, a mirror I bought in the store, and my girlfriend to help me in between her work because she's working 8 to 10 hours a day. And I decided, okay, I'm going to put myself in front of the camera on top of that. And I highly advise every filmmaker to do this.
I love this.
You don't have to share the film, but I highly advise you write the script, you put yourself in front of the camera, and you try acting. It helped me understand better what my actors might be thinking, not necessarily knowing what they're thinking, but knowing why you need a second, a third, and a fourth take.
Hmm.
and why you can't expect your actors to nail it on the first take, but maybe not so much like Kubrick, where you do 75 to 150 takes.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between there is the answer. But I definitely felt like you can nail it on the first take, but give the actor some breathing room. I've always felt like I always want to give my actors breathing room when I've ever worked with them, but now I understand even more why,
Yeah.
and understand, and I can empathize better, and I can probably direct them better now just from that small experience.
See, I love this. You're the
Um,
first filmmaker I've had on who has given this advice to, try and see what it's like on the other side of the camera. And I, as an actor, I'm constantly trying to give this advice to other actors about make a film, like direct
yes,
something, get on the other side to
actors
to
have
learn
to.
more. Yeah.
Screenwriters have to. You don't have a
Mm-hmm.
choice, especially in nowadays market, because there's no excuse. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even an old iPhone, whatever it is, a GoPro, a used video camera, there's no excuse not to make a project. Doesn't mean you have to share it.
Yeah, like you
Doesn't
said,
mean
you
you have
don't
to
have to
ever have to
share
show
it.
it to anybody.
It can be just a learning experience, but even that is going to be informative and helpful.
At the same time, if you get a chance, Google around and find Quentin Tarantino's first video project.
Okay, what is it? Okay,
I don't know I have no
what
idea
it's
what it's
called.
called. I haven't looked at it in probably 15, 20 years, but I think it was like 3/4 inch video, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And I'm sure Quentin's proud of the fact that it's terrible because he was learning. Um, he was learning how to be a filmmaker, but there's nothing wrong with making a bad project as long as you embrace whatever that is.
Yeah.
And if it's terrible, but you embrace terrible, that's fine because terrible is relative. There's probably an audience for terrible films. I mean, look at
Some people love that.
the
Sharknado? Yeah.
Sharknado. and I know David Latten, he purposely makes films that are bad. Yeah.
And
Yep.
people enjoy them. They genuinely bring people joy. So if that's the mission of the film, then it's accomplishing its mission, then great. Great
Yeah.
for everyone working on Sharknado. Awesome. I'm
Yep.
sure it's one of the most fun sets to be on.
I don't know about that, but anyway. But at the same time, if you have aspirations to be a Christopher Nolan or, you know, name your big name director, right? Danny Boyle's one of my favorites because he's a consistently solid, great filmmaker. I don't think there's a single Danny Boyle film that's not good.
Mm.
You can't say that about every director. Every director has a film where you're like, oof, wow, that hurts. But if you have aspirations of being an A-list style director with A-list look and A-list quality and A-list filmmaking, you have to shoot stuff again and again on your own till you can figure out what that is. What's the mojo that puts that together?
Mm.
And you
Yeah.
can't blame money. You could blame money, but that's blaming gets no one anywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
it's shouldn't be an excuse.
Yep, it shouldn't be anymore. And at the same time, if you combine that with the endless drive to get to where you want to be, and then finding a job in the film industry that pays you a living wage, you will probably forge yourself a decent career. And whether you become a famous director or a successful director is anybody's guess. Um, I don't know that the top 10 directors out there are the best directors in the world, but they're the top 10. And the directors that aren't working out there might be some of the best. We're in the world of everybody trying to get their face on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and everything else. And, I wonder how much that has value. You're going to find there's going to be some director that comes out of TikTok.
Yeah.
And there's going to be 100 filmmakers that went to a really expensive film school that are going to be really pissed off that's not them. That person doesn't have talent. But you don't know that person doesn't have talent, or you don't know that wasn't their path.
Yeah.
You can't get frustrated by that. You just have to keep doing what you do.
Jimmy, this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing so much time with us. It's been great to have you on. I know fans loved part 1. So it's awesome to have you back for this part 2. So much great info. Yeah, thanks for being on the show. And what are you looking forward to next?
Right now, I am in development with my own production company for our first feature film, which is a screenplay I wrote, and the goal is to make it in North Idaho, away from COVID and more COVID-friendly environment. So stay tuned.
Great. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Sierra.